market access for American exports. In a separate agreement, Cambodia announced it would eliminate tariffs on all U.S. industrial, food and agricultural products, while working with Washington to reduce non-tariff barriers. Air Cambodia will also partner with Boeing to strengthen the country's aviation sector. Thailand's leader also praised the reciprocal trade agreement and showed his optimism over the deal. President Trump called the agreements a strong message to Southeast Asia, saying the United States is the region 100% and intends to remain a strong partner for many generations. Let's listen in to what some of the leaders had to say.
And I really feel that when we make deals, we see two countries that we do a lot of business with. We do a lot of business with both of them. We have to use that business to make sure they don't get into wars.
I am also pleased that today we announced the joint statement on the framework for a U.S.-Thailand agreement on reciprocal trade, which I hope will facilitate our negotiations on tariffs for conclusion by end of this year.
We're now joined by Stephen Naji. He's a professor at the International Christian University located in Tokyo, Japan. Thank you very much for joining us. Stephen, an eventful Sunday with ASEAN kicking off in Malaysia. A lot to discuss. Of course, this morning we saw the signing of this peace deal officially between Thailand and Cambodia, but also the signing of many treaties and also some promises from Southeast Asian nations in the presence of US President Donald Trump. What image does this put forward at US presence and interaction with the region, especially for trade, as it is a region that was particularly battered by Donald Trump's tariff policy?
Thanks very much, Thomas, for having me. There's a symbolic side to this visit, and then something that is more practical. And the symbolic side is that the president has come to the ASEAN meeting, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. This is something that the association wants. It wants to be relevant. It wants to have the highest level representation from the United States visit and acknowledge its importance in the Indo-Pacific's regional integration process. It also wants to have the United States there because it's interested in anchoring extra-regional partners in the region so that it's not overshadowed by China. That's the reality in poll after poll. And I think the most important one is the Institute of Southeast Asian Studies survey on Southeast Asia. While Southeast Asian countries welcome investment from China, they're also extremely worried about its hegemonic ambitions and its behavior in the region. So that's a symbolic side, and I think from ASEAN's standpoint, it's really important. And from the United States side, it wants to demonstrate that it is committed to ASEAN and the region's integration process. In terms of take-homes, I think the peace agreement is very much just, this will sound terrible, it's just icing on the cake. The real achievement really is deals about rare earth materials, commitments from Malaysia in terms of keeping rare earth materials being processed and being shipped. And I think more moving forward, commitments in terms of trade and commitments in terms of abiding by international law. Whether this will happen or not, this will really depend on the United States' behavior under President Trump, who is not necessarily predictable, and it will depend on each ASEAN state's politics. Remember, the region is very heterogeneous. There's socialist states to democratic states to theocratic states, and they all have their own interests. And collectively, their single interest is maintaining strategic autonomy, and this is why they have the association itself.
Yes, Stephen, do stay with us. We will, of course, here on NewsX World, bring you all that news coming out of ASEAN as it continues over the next 3 days. But we have more news coming out of the city of Kuala Lumpur as US Trade Representative Jamieson Greer has said that trade talks between the United States and China were moving towards a point where President Donald Trump and President Xi Jinping can have a productive meeting this week. Meanwhile, as the talks between the Chinese and US officials have concluded, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has said that American and Chinese officials have reached a very successful framework for the upcoming meeting. Greer has also said a broad range of topics were discussed, including extending the truce on trade measures. Trump and Xi are expected to meet on Thursday in South Korea at the end of the US president's 5-day trip to Malaysia, Japan and South Korea. Let's in fact listen in to what the two US officials have said ahead of the Trump and Xi meeting.
Sure, we spent a lot of time last night. We spent a lot of time this morning talking about a potential framework moving forward. I think we're moving forward to the final details of the type of agreement that the leaders can review and decide if they want to conclude together. As you know, President Xi and President Trump will be meeting later this week. We've had quite constructive discussions with our Chinese counterparts, and we think we're getting to a point where we have something we can present to the leaders for their consideration.
Yes, this is the fifth time that the Vice Premier Hu Feng and I have seen each other with great respect. And I think what was different this time is this was in preparation for the meeting with the two leaders. So we were determined to provide them for a framework for a successful meeting in Korea, which I think it will.
We are now joined by Andrew K.P. Liang. He is an independent Chinese strategist and he joins us live from Hong Kong. Thank you very much, Andrew, for joining us. Talks in Malaysia sound positive, Andrew. Just the second day of discussions. We've seen the senior Chinese official arrive today, and we're also already getting positive statements. And it seems like they've reached a framework in order for Trump and Xi to look at said framework at their meeting. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, this, of course, paving the final few meters, as it were, before the historic meeting between President Trump and President Xi. Hopefully, will agree on some sort of modus operandi between these two great powers who are locked in rivalry. Now, I don't think the meeting is going to solve all the problems, but at least both sides are seeking some areas for accommodation. And then the current meeting at the lower levels appear to have reached some sort of a milestone. And I think that from President Trump's point of view, the most important pressing issues are soybeans, which of course represent the Republican Party's main supporters. They're all in the agricultural soybean producing states. And with the midterm elections looming up, that's very, very urgent and important. And the second, or equally important, of course, is the rare earths restrictions. And hopefully China would be able to ease at least some of the restrictions, but I don't think that Beijing is going to give up that very powerful countermeasure. But at least the paths are being smoothened. Some of the obstacles are being got around with, and paving the way to hopefully more positive meetings between President Trump and President Xi.
Yes. I was wondering if I could go to Stephen Nagy next and ask him about the news that the US and Chinese officials have indeed reached a framework, and the statements from the US officials that it does indeed seem positive, or at least it sounds as it is, coming from those statements from Jamieson Greer and from Scott Bessent. If you could talk about some of the possible sticking points after these 5 meetings that the officials have had, just in the nick of time for that meeting in South Korea at the end of this week.
So I think Mr. Leong has really pointed out a lot of critical points that I think are correct. Both sides want to come to have a deal. The challenge is that I think in the White House, we have somebody that can change the deal at the very last minute in that sense, I think there's probably some anxiety on the China side if Mr. Trump will come and stick to the talking points. And I think from that standpoint, there is some uncertainty, and not only uncertainty in Beijing, but for the region. The region wants Washington and Beijing to come to the table to try to settle their trade differences, to stabilize their trade relationships so that they can start to begin to expand their trading relationship with both states. The region is extremely complex in terms of its economic integration, and they can't really choose between the United States and China. And again, as I mentioned, they want these two parties to come to some kind of agreement. Now, where are the sticking points? Soybeans, I think, is there. Will China relax the rare earth material exports and exports of processing technologies? I think these are some areas that the United States is looking for. At the same time, I think that they are trying to get some other kinds of compromises from the Chinese if they're going to commit to a trade deal. For example, stopping support through third countries for the Russian war on Ukraine, assistance on North Korea's denuclearization, or other issues within the region. Both countries don't look at trade just through trade lenses. They connect it to everything. And in this sense, I still think that there is some uncertainty about some kind of tentative short-term bargain to cool relations and stabilize relations in the short term. In the mid to long term, the structural competition is going to increase, and I think both sides are preparing for a long competition rather than a short-term deal.
Stephen Nagy, thank you very much for joining us. Absolute pleasure to have you on the programme. We now move on over, and more news from China, where China's traditional Baijiu, a strong liquor often exceeding 50% alcohol, is facing declining popularity among younger drinkers. In response, struggling distillers are introducing milder versions to appeal to a new generation. Economic pressures and Beijing's crackdown on lavish alcohol-fueled banquets are pushing innovation in the sector. Willian Yiben recently launched 29 crush-on cutting alcohol content from 52 to 29%. Other major producers, including An Hui Gonjiang and Should Yi Spirits, have introduced similar lighter options to attract modern consumers. Companies are also using minimalist packaging and celebrity endorsements, yet a 2022 survey shows 70% of young Chinese still view Baijiu as unhealthy. Andrew KP Leung joins us once again. What more can you tell us about this drink, Andrew, and also the modern Chinese generation, and also which, along like the West, is drinking much less than the older generation?
Well, it's a makeover of a long-established Chinese brand, the Mao Tai, which dates back to centuries. Of course, the Mao Tai has been enriched and elevated to almost a national treasure with the price to match, and that finds a lot of banquets between businesses, between businessmen and high-ranking officials. But that, of course, being targeted by the anti-corruption campaign, causing a huge downturn in the fortunes of the Mao Tai Corporation. And now the Mao Tai businesses are targeting young people and trying to lower the alcohol content, repackage it, and even adding a degree of or lace the coffee with Mao Tai so as to invent new products that appeal to the younger generation. But of course, the young generation are very, very health conscious. It depends on the degree of this liquor in either coffee or other drinkables. So I think that nevertheless, the younger generation, they like to try new things. They like to experience new tastes, and that's what's happening now.
Yes, thank you very much, Andrew KP.